evening, everybody, and broadcasting from a location deep within the Milky Way galaxy. Welcome to Broadcast from the Dispatch. Welcome.
What's going on? It's another Wednesday. Another Wednesday,
another episode, and an episode that I am super excited about tonight. A few of my heroes within the indie comic and black comic genre are on tonight, and I'm excited. Some familiar faces, some new faces. All in all, I think it's going to be a great evening.
I agree. So all of y'all out there who are listening, watching, all that good stuff, make sure you get your questions in.
Yeah.
So
yeah,
this is the perfect time to ask questions.
They're actually here, and so pop your questions in the channel for and the comments section below for them, and we'll ask them as long as they're appropriate.
Exactly, appropriate questions, people.
Yeah,
no craziness.
So brief update. Last week we launched our Patreon on last week's Wednesday night show, patreon.com/indiecomicsdispatch. We already have 5 patrons, and we said when we get to 10 patrons, we're going to do a live D&D session with Scorpio, who last week had no idea what D&D stood for.
Yes, so, that changed the whole direction of the conversation.
So I'm looking forward to that. So if we get 5 more patrons, we're going to do that. Chris from Homebrewed Comics says he would DM for us.
Yep.
And so I'm actually not that versed in D&D. My daughter plays all the time, but I've only played like twice ever. So
it's been a while since I played, but I don't mind getting back into it. I played that, and then I got into Champions and Rifts.
I have no idea what any of that is.
Rifts is like Rifts is hard to explain. It's like
I feel like a
future type game, and Champions is more of a superhero type. Type deal. So
very good. Well, you ready to introduce our guests?
Oh yeah.
Well, first, I'm going to welcome to the stream, just because his bio is first in my document here. Professor John Jennings is a curator of the Megascope list and illustrator of the graphic novel adaptations of Olivia E. Butler's Kindred and Parable of the Sower. He is professor of media and cultural studies at the University of California, Riverside. John, welcome.
Hey, thank you.
Welcome.
Thank you for being here.
Okay. Anyway, how y'all doing?
Doing well.
Interactive.
Thank you. No problem. Thank you so much for being here. Next up, in his blazer this evening is Stacey Robinson, an Arthur Schomburg Fellow, completed his Master's of Fine Arts at the University of Buffalo. His art speculates futures where Black people are free from colonial influences. He is also part of the collaborative duo Black Kirby, which explores Afro-speculative existence via the aesthetic of Jack Kirby, and his partner in that is also here this evening, John.
Yep.
Stacey, welcome.
Yeah. How you doing?
Doing well. How are you, sir?
Y'all gonna get this blazer tonight.
Man,
nothing wrong with that.
You are the best dressed guest we've ever had. Like,
right on.
You usually get up here and it's like, usually I'm either in a hoodie or another form of a hoodie. Like,
I had no idea what the dress code was. I was like, yo.
Now you've had something new to the guest list that we have to explain. So cussing's okay, and you don't have to wear a blazer.
Okay, right on.
Next up, William Jones is president and founder of the Afrofuturism Network. He is a historian, comic book geek, writer, educator. Jones is a sought-after public speaker on the subjects of history of Black people in America, the image of Black people in various forms of media, pop culture, and hip-hop music, just to name a few. He is the author of the book The Ex-Con Voodoo Priest, Goddess, and the African King, a social, cultural, and political analysis of 4 Black comic book heroes. William, welcome.
What's going on? Thank you so much for having me.
No problem, man. Thank you for being here. Next up, Brian Joseph Lambert. I feel like I'm his father, getting him in trouble when I say it. Is the award-winning lead contributing writer at Wingless Entertainment. He specializes in bringing diversity to action, adventure, and fantasy and sci-fi worlds. In 2017, while earning his Bachelor of Fine Arts in Creative Writing at Full Sail University, he published his first novel, Ascension, The Crucian Saga, Book 1. In 2019, he earned a master's degree in entertainment business and released Justice issue number 0, followed by Justice number 1 in 2020, as well as Nightfall Part 1, also as part of the Wingless Comics series. Brian, friend of the show, welcome back. Your friend got a blazer.
Another blazer?
Yeah, not to be out blazered. I had to get my Miami Vice on so I could be like Stacey out here.
Oh my! I see how it's gonna go.
That's hilarious. That is hilarious.
That
Brett,
is
you got a blazer? I don't.
Well, I do upstairs, but I'm in the basement. This is where I
have one.
The last blazer like top I have is my military uniform, and that's in the closet. I'm not pulling that out.
Finally, we're going to welcome you, Warney Hughes. He is the CEO of Great Gale LLC, as well as the writer and illustrator of Bold Saga, Brave Onwards, Limit Destroyer. He is a husband, has an AAS in commercial art, digital technology, and has mentored others in this field as the Computer Graphics Club president. After a decade of experience in graphic design, illustration, and more, he noticed a gap regarding the manga industry. So he utilized all his creative skills to produce and self-publish an Afrofuturistic manga that celebrates African culture, a manga that will inspire and empower the next generation of young kings and queens. Warney, welcome.
Thank you for having me.
Thank you for joining. Thank you for being here.
Yumani inspired this whole night. He contacted me and said, "Hey, I'd love to be on your show." And I said, "You know what? Let's do an Afrofuturism night." And so, so if you have a bad time, blame Yumani.
Dang.
All that in one moment.
He doesn't even have a blazer on.
I know,
right?
Oh my gosh, I can't.
Right, that dude. He's that dude.
I can't.
Oh, gentlemen, thank you all for being here. And I look forward to tonight. Again, if you have questions, comments out there you're watching, feel free to pop them in the comment section. We will do our best to get to them. Sometimes we have a lot, sometimes we have just a few. So we're looking forward to that. If you guys have any comments, feel free to ask. But I thought I'd start first. We did introductions, but is there anything else anybody wants to add about themselves that I didn't cover?
I would like to point out that Stacey Robinson is an assistant professor of graphic design at the University of Champaign.
That is awesome.
That's
That
awesome.
bio is mad old. I was like, ooh. It's like I gotta search the web and delete all of those old
I'm
bios.
not sure where I pulled that from, to be
No,
honest.
hey, no worries. Everybody does that.
That's all I wanted to point out. That's it.
And then Across the Tracks, latest book, Across the Tracks, is dropping May 4th. Yeah,
Very good.
Race Massacre and Rebuilding.
Very good. And John, you actually just had a book drop too.
Yes. I have a copy. Well, actually, I have a copy right here. I do have a copy right here, but it's so much stuff around it. But yeah, the After the Rain, which is the first Megascope book, which is a adaptation of the short story On the Road by Nnedi Okorafor, Sister Nnedi Okorafor, so a Niger-American science fiction fantasy writer. Yep. I'm actually trying to grab a copy of it, and I do actually have a book box. Oh, there we go. Always come prepared, right? There you go.
There you go.
Nice.
Look at that spot.
Very good.
Bling, bling. Anyway. So that came out January 5th, and then the whole world imploded, and I'm sure no one was thinking about my book. So thanks. Appreciate that. I'm just kidding.
Trump derailed everything.
Upcoming con.
No, man. He did it on purpose because he hates me.
Yeah.
What's that, William?
I said, can I promote an upcoming Comic-Con if things are still standing? Yeah, so me and my partner, Mr. Chad Eric Smith of Mr. Duke Productions, we're putting on GrillCon 2021, Silver Spring, Maryland, this September. So we tried to have it last September, but you know how things happen. So Hopefully this September, Silver Spring, Maryland.
Oh,
Very good.
You said GrillCon?
RioCon.
RioCon. Okay,
Yeah,
I was like, okay, we grilling and conning. I'm like,
I'm taking that idea. That will be the next one.
right, taking the blazer off for that.
I know, right? No, that sounds good. Yeah, that sounds good. Keep us
Very
informed.
good.
Right on.
Well, let's jump right in. So my guess is there's people listening either tonight or after the fact via the video that'll be out there or on the podcast that'll be released tomorrow, and they're wondering what the term Afrofuturism is. And so I know we have a diverse listener base. So let's open it up with what is Afrofuturism.
That's always the first thing.
Whoever wants to go first.
I actually wrote out a definition of how I was looking because I knew that was going to be the first question. That's always the first question. So I was like, a philosophical and critical making practice that engages with Afrocentric interdisciplinary narratives that deploy speculative tropes to deal with tensions around Black subjectivity and negotiations around Black lives and possible Black presence, past, and futures. And so I'll just say is like using science fiction and fantasy to deal with like political issues around what it means to be Black in the diaspora. So is that okay?
Yeah, I like that.
I love that definition.
I was trying to rework. I was just trying to think because the older definition that Mark Derry probably deals with 20th century technoculture and cyborgs and such, but it doesn't. At the time, it wasn't dealing with the diaspora. So we're dealing more with the Black experience as a worldwide experience, and then thinking about how various types of political economies are dealt with through speculative fiction. So these days, I talk about myself as an Afro-speculative creator. So because we do horror, science fiction, fantasy, all of that. It's not just about thinking about the future, but it's also how do you change the future by thinking about what's going on right now, but also using speculation to do that. So that's how I'm at it. So.
I love that. I love that.
Same.
That's
Anybody
amazing.
have something to add? Because I have a follow-up question to that based on that.
Only thing I would add. Oh, you first. I don't want to cut you off.
No, go ahead. You Arnie, go.
I was just going to say one thing I could add to it is that, in my opinion, Afrofuturism rewrites the narrative because we've been accustomed to hearing things for a certain way for a certain time. So it allows you to rewrite the narrative. It allows you to break the limits of what was by imagining what could be. And that's so uplifting, empowering, and inspiring, and all of that evokes agency.
Yes.
Agreed.
I totally agree with that.
Agreed.
I love that, and that's one reason. I don't know if Brian Lambert considers himself a writer of Afrofuturism, but when he was on the show to do representation in comics, he said, when I asked the question, what stories are missing about Black men, he said all of them.
Right.
And looking to the future of that and what's missing and rewriting that future, you, Arnie, is exactly right. And that's exactly why I invited Brian on the show, actually.
There's a
You keep earning your price back, Brian.
what was it, Spaceballs, if you guys remember, not super old movie, but pretty old movie, right? There's a part where they're supposed to be combing in the desert, and you make the joke of like, there's an actual like combs, right?
Had the black dudes with the
You get to
pick.
the black stormtroopers, and they got the pick,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
And of
Didn't
course,
they
they're
have a
like,
fist at the top?
we ain't found shit, right? But that's like a very it's microcosmic of what Afrofuturism is, right? In terms of giving Black people the same task, less tools, less experience, less, and then us imagining the more. Like that's one of the things and one of the reasons I love how the speculative fiction movement is mixing in. You get authors like Okafor, Milton Davis. I mean, obviously tons of people, everybody who's on this panel right now doing the same thing. And it it's crazy that we have Afrofuturism. I love it, right? I love it to death. But the fact that there was a period before where people didn't imagine Black people in the future says everything that you need to know about Afrofuturism.
Right.
It's the opposite. It's the inverse reaction to that attempt to erase us from the future, from everything, from existence.
Yeah, and if you did see us in the future, it was like one in the galaxy far, far away.
Yeah.
That's also a long time ago, bro.
Yeah, it's a long time ago too.
Future technically, man.
You know, and it's like
point.
how did he get there? Is he a clone? Is he a clone trooper? Like, is that how he got there? You know.
Yeah.
But yeah, I remember Spaceballs was one of my. I don't know. I like that movie growing up as a kid. If I'm not mistaken, didn't that pick have a Black Power fist at the top of it? I think it did.
Yeah.
As soon as you started saying, I just started thinking about it. I'm like, I think it had the the
Mel
Black Power fist at the
Brooks
top.
was on it, man. Mel Brooks always had a very, very strong commentary voice, regardless of what was going on. And I think that we are in an age, information-wise, and everything else, that we can expound upon the voices that came before us. For me, that's what Afrofuturism is, right? Expounding on the narratives and the folk tales and everything that is Black culture, and making it just culture. You know what I mean? Like making it as at home as other people do, calling their culture just culture.
Yep.
Just what it is.
You know, I always like to use the example of the Walking Dead television series, right? When if that is the future, right? Because the time, at least up to the point I was watching it, they never really said what time that was, right? So if that is the future, if you have Michonne and what's my man's and Morgan in there, right? Just to name a few, right? That is the Afrofuture. It's dystopian, but we in there and we surviving, right? And defining that future, right? Got some issues with it.
Yeah, what do you got to say, man?
Are we gonna talk about the treatment of brothers on The Walking Dead? Is that what we're about to do?
Yeah, but my boy got eaten all the way up. He got done dirty.
I think like the thing that really got me into Afrofuturism, first for me, I was already one before it was a word. Before I was familiar with the term, I mean, that's me from birth.
Right.
And the thing that was interesting for me was, growing up, and I'm sure everyone on this panel has the same story. You're looking for yourself in the comics and the cartoons and so forth. And when we're there, we're underrepresented, we're misrepresented. We're put in a space where, as a young person, you didn't be that guy. If you're watching a cartoon, you see the black character and so forth. So I was always looking for myself, and this was something that was talked about within my family, because I've been comic collecting since I was a kid. So this was a conversation we were having in the home. So I was always tuned into this idea of where was I in these stories. I mean, I don't know how far back the panel goes, but I can remember Rickety Rocket, with a bunch of black kids in the junkyard, but at the same time, you juxtapose that to Scooby-Doo, two different looks. One black character, that would be like the background character in science fiction, fantasy, and so forth. So that was something that I was always tuned into. Where was I in these stories? And combining that with my love of history, this was the perfect space for me. And then I found out that there was a term or a coined term for this. It just fits perfectly.
Yeah, that's how I was too. I mean, I came across the term maybe a little bit over a decade ago now, and it's based off of like these cyborgs I was making, these black cyborgs, and I was making them because they seemed like a natural way to talk about stereotypes and these systemic issues around stereotyping. And then someone said, "Oh, this looks really Afrofuturist," and I had never heard the term before. And then once I started doing some digging around, like yourself, William, I was like, "Oh, this is exactly what I'm trying to do." No, it's just really great because everybody's echoing the same things that I love about the culture is that, Brian was talking about this idea of systemic erasure, Iwani is talking about this idea of reclaiming the history of the past, or excuse me, the history of the future, my bad, reclaiming the history of the future. And that's what Lisa Yazek writes about. She's like, well, Afrofuturism is definitely like a reclamation of the history of the future, because as you're stating, you don't see yourself in that space, and you need to reconcile that. It needs to be reconciled. And also too, I think there's this kind of like really, energetic political reclamation of information, like this kind of like critical archiving that I think that we do as well. That which seems to be part of everybody's practice is to go find these things and then collect them and actually kind of interpret them and put them away for people to study. That's why I like the idea of John Confer's oh, what is it called? The data thief.
Data thief?
The data thief of like he's a time traveling archaeologist just putting aside pieces of and trying to decode Black history and Black creative culture. Yeah.
I want to pop up real quick. J.R. Poole on YouTube says, here in Pittsburgh, artist Alicia Wormsley had a billboard that read, "There are Black people in the future," and it met with objections.
Yeah, I actually just answered him. That's what I was doing. I was answering him on YouTube. But yeah, that's wild.
Yeah, I totally understand it, because even when it comes to manga, there's poor representation of Black people. I mean, there was even a meme that said something about manga and anime are supposed to be a perfect world, and if Black people are in it, that ruins the entire premise of it. I'm like,
oh, wow.
What?
I saw that one, yeah.
It's crazy that people really think of this, but that's why Melissa Kimball said this world does not move without Black creativity. They can say what they want, but at the end of the day, when we create things, it's just different. It sets a tone, a standard, and Afrofuturism, just as you mentioned before, expounds on that to a deeper level.
If you think about the I'm sorry.
No, go ahead, Brian.
If you think about the power, like you're saying, of Black creativity, look at the last. I mean, obviously, John was talking about it with regard to his book release. Look at the last week. Look what's happened, right? Look at the last year. Before Black Lives Matter, there was no tag, right? There was no all lives matter, blue lives. You know what I mean? Like now, all lives, quote unquote, matter, because that phrase was coined by Black people. We are Breonna Taylor. We are Tamir Rice. We are Mike Brown. And then, we are friends. It's a continuing thing where the creativity that we delve into, that is part of our culture, part of our DNA, is incorporated into the world, and then that racing part comes in. Again, look at last week. If last week had been different, if it had gone differently, that's going to be part of the point of everything that happens. To erase the Black struggle, to erase, Civil War II, so that you can erase all the steps that we've made and put us back into whatever you thought was okay, whatever you thought was the thing that we were.
That's exactly what I was going to say. Last week was about equity and restorative justice, right? That was when we're fighting for equity and restorative justice. This is last week was a response, right? So it's almost like I almost want to not use this term, but a good gauge to clock whether you are. Am I being progressive? Are we really progressing? Are we making the future more equitable? Well, if nobody's saying anything, if the white supremacists ain't fighting back, then you might want to check that, right?
Exactly.
When storming the Capitol is about like the liberation or halting the liberation of underrepresented people, right? So that is exactly what it's about. Exactly.
No, I totally echo that. Yeah, because what's the phrase? And I keep forgetting who said this, but I always mention it. But it's like the phrase goes, to the privileged, equity feels like oppression.
Yep.
To the privileged, equity feels like oppression. You're so used to actually being the center of everything and anything like catering to you that you're perceiving it as a loss. Not realizing that when everybody went, and it's a rising tide carries all ships, right?
Yeah.
You should, in a society like ours, you should want everybody to have representation of themselves, to see everyone do well, if you really care about those things. You know what I'm saying? But that's obviously you don't. You know what I'm saying? That's the thing. And it's a painful thing to see the truth. The truth of the matter is that the country that we live in has never been an equitable country, ever. We've only been a democracy since Black people started getting the vote, right? I mean, truly, right? Yeah. Which is fairly recent. So
I was gonna say, are we? I mean, we kind of are now. But
well, no, I mean, yeah, no,
we're still.
I was being facetious. Yeah. So, yeah, because I was more of an oligarchy or like a meritocracy or some other type of construct. But Afrofuturism gives us the tools to imagine better spaces. Make better choices, to warn people of how things could go sideways, like Sister Octavia Butler in the Parable of the Sower series. That's
exactly.
Those are warnings, But you step outside the door right now, you in Parable of the Sower. So it's like
pretty damn close.
Yeah. Well, I mean, the thing is, if you ever want to know what's going to affect the country or affect the world tomorrow, you just got to look at what's affecting Black people today.
Canary.
Any problem that folks are complaining about, anything that people are talking about, we've been talking about. But because we're marginalized, because we are ignored, those stories are never heard. So, people now act like they came up with something when they start talking about negative representation in the press. We've been talking about that.
That's that story out of St. Louis. Yeah.
So that's something we've been talking about, and all of a sudden everyone wants to say fake news and all of these different things. And the way I look at it is, Black folks are the battery. We supply the energy for the culture. And when you want to have something that you want the world to buy into, it becomes important to have Black folks be part of that movement if you really want it to go global. And we see that time and time again. Just like any battery, once you put it in the toy, once you put it in the device, you've forgotten all about it, and you don't pay attention to that battery again until you need the battery. So that's the way I look at our existence in this country, where the battery, and like I said, the battery gets ignored.
That's a great analogy.
Yeah, it is.
Sevens Art on Instagram says I'm assuming it's a he. I may be falsely assuming that, but that person wishes his phone service could keep up, and to DM the forum for these type of topics. You can watch us after the fact, Sevens Art. We're a podcast too, but where are some places that you gentlemen know of where people can go to discuss this or read more about this? Let's just jump to that right now.
Well, there's quite a few discussions that are happening. I think you just have to be tuned into it. Recently, I was honored with being part of a Black Futures Forum on 2 occasions through UNESCO. Been part of those conversations. When things were public, I found myself part of these conversations across the country. So for me, I don't know what everyone else would say to this. I would say there are quite a few sources, quite a few locations and places. And if I'm sure, like I said, I'm always putting out where I am and so forth. And I know these gentlemen are as well. So just by following us, that also would introduce you to a lot of these conversations.
Yeah, because I share this stuff whenever I get it. And I would also say, like, I would like to know more about what is meant by that question, because like whenever Black people are gathering, we talk, this is what we're talking about. Like, until we're free, the only conversation is about getting free. So, depending on how you think about that, right? If you're in your local barbershop, and we winning, if you're talking about we winning or whether we losing, we talking about Afrofuturism, right? So it depends on how, if you're talking about really cool Black science fiction where Black people are centered, that's sometimes a a more nuanced type of conversation that might be taking place somewhere. So I'm not really sure exactly, when the question is asked where these types of conversations are happening, because we're talking about cool Black futures, and we're also talking about politics. So, and those things intersect very easily for us, So, I think that whenever we're gathered, this is what we're talking about.
So I also think the follow stream is really, really important. I know that I've probably interacted with all of you through comments on Facebook, right? Someone else's comment, and you got to be willing to. I've done my share of searches. It's not hard to type in Afrofuturism in Facebook, and I say it's not hard because you're going to find 100 groups that come up, and we're going to be individually in 50 of them a piece. You know what I mean? So there's a lot of overlap. If you want these conversations and you want to find them, you have to look, but you don't have to look hard.
We really are. It's easy to find us. Yeah, definitely.
Yeah, I totally agree. I mean, to piggyback off what Brian was saying, there are many Afrofuturism groups on Facebook. I post in multiple of them daily. But also, there's also events as well. Like recently, Afro Comic Con, they had different panels, and I was able to moderate one on why Afrofuturism matters. So there's panels as well as there's groups on Facebook and Instagram and other social media as well.
Afrofuturism 2.0.
Yeah, Afrofuturism 2.0. The State of Black Fiction.
Black science fiction. Black Comics? COMIX.
Age of Black Comics. Black Comics creators. There's a ton of them.
Black Comics.
There's a ton of Comic-Con focused on Black themes and so forth. That when we had them in person, they were going on across the country, and now folks have moved to the virtual world.
Yeah, both going on they're going on like now. It's just Schaumburg.
Right.
two of the biggest black and brown cons, right? Yeah, in the world.
Yeah.
Happening right now, actually. Yep.
That's right. And up until like MLK Day. So it's like, just let your fingers do the walking. Google's, yeah.
Black Comic Book Festival at the Schomburg, and then the other one is Black Comic Arts Festival.
Yeah, SoulCon is another one.
That's Black Comics Day.
BlurredCon
in February. Well, not next February. No.
Yeah.
I hope everybody's taking notes.
Yeah, I hope so too, because I know that's a really common question, and it's there sometimes when something you don't see something, we assume it doesn't exist, right? Oh man, we need to have black black superheroes. We do. And for almost 100 years,
right.
But when you don't see it, we assume that it doesn't exist, and we have to make sure that we are visible. But that search is really important as well, because we're out there and we are killing it.
Mm-hmm. And on that note, I would also add that please remember, folks, you are voting with your dollars. There's oftentimes a huge divide between what we say we want and what we pay for. And that's where a lot of times we fail. One of the motivations, this is the second Comic-Con that I'm going to be holding. One of the motivations for me was, I just got tired of people saying, where do I find it? Like the question was just posed and so forth. And I knew the creators were there because I met them. So I think that if we're going to say we want something, we have to be willing to support it. And, in speaking with a lot of these comic book creators, they run into these obstacles where they're putting a book out and folks are looking at it, and because it's not, Marvel, DC, or whatever, and the price may be a little different, all of a sudden they're rejecting it. And I've also had black comic creators tell me they get the sense that sometimes black patrons are embarrassed to be at their tables. So
I mean, multiple times.
Yeah, I would say, if we're going to say we want these things, we also have to vote with our dollars.
I absolutely agree.
This is why we started co-founding these spaces to create like a network of content. Actually, I want to be on a panel with Spike Trotman, Andre Owens. Let's see who else. Ron Wembley and Jason Reeves, because Jason Reeves, Milton Davis, and Andre Owens have started a black independent distribution company.
Big distro.
Help with like distributing black independent work, and then of course C. Spike Trotman is the queen of like Kickstarters, and honestly is like the largest comic book publisher, probably in Chicago.
That's a great point, John. And I'm going to take a break right here because we actually plugged the big distro, and so I'm going to run their ad.
Oh, that's right.
Nice.
Big, we just wanted to bring the vibe of like an indie comic convention to the retailers.
For you out there right now, those of you who always are coming to conventions and saying, can you find your comics on the web? Well, now you can at bigdistro.com.
Like the creativity and the art and the writing is comparable to mainstream comics, and in some instances even superior.
That was
good. I like that.
That was like calm response right there. I love it.
Right, that was right on time.
That was right on time. One for the person who asked the question about like where you find the Afrofuturist stuff, I would start with like things like the Afrofuturism book by Ytasha Womack. Oh my goodness, I'm forgetting the name of it right now. Sherry Renee Thomas's series, Dark Matter.
Yeah.
Dark Matter. God. Dark Matter, 1 and 2, which is the anthology. There's also Bill Campbell and Ed's piece too, Mothership from Rosalind. It's a good spot too. And then also you can look at Ronaldo Anderson's book if you want like a really deeper, like more academic view of like how Afrofuturism has changed. He has 2 books that he co-authored. I mean, he co-edited. So yeah,
Afrofuturism 2.0.
Yeah, those are good places to start.
I would also say and check out Black Comics Returns.
Oh.
Yeah,
like it was
I got my copy right there. You can't really see it, but it's right there.
Yeah. Yeah.
So a couple comments I want to get to from social media. Embracing My Inner Geek says, do any of you have Kickstarters going for us to vote with our dollars? Brian?
So I don't have one currently, but February 19th, Nightfall Part 2 will drop. So we are gearing up for that. Obviously, it's a continuing series of Nightfall, which is going to be 5 parts in total. We will finish it up before the end of the year. There's no all gas, no breaks. There will be options and tiers for everyone to get caught up with issue 1, get issue 2, even get issue 1 of Justice. Go back a little bit to our catalog so that we can keep bringing you guys the material that you actually are asking for and have supported us greatly so far. So follow Wingless Comics on Instagram, Facebook, and you'll get all the updates.
We should definitely cross promote, Brian, because mine kicking off on February 1st. Cypher Team issue 1 on the Kickstarter.
No doubt, man.
Yeah.
So
no doubt, bro.
I would definitely start. I'll put that up there. Let people know to look out for part 2.
Anybody else have anything coming out? Well, John and Stacey both have books that have just been dropped or are about to drop. You can Amazon them, I'm sure, and search them out. So
that cover is beautiful.
Bones. I can't wait to get happy about the Bones, John.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, Box of Bones was paid for by a Kickstarter, so thank you.
Awesome.
It
Well,
drops.
I don't have a Kickstarter, but I don't know if you can see it.
Yes.
Go check it out. XCOM, Goddess and the African King. Find that on Amazon. You find it on my website. And working on the second one right now, so got my fingers crossed for that one. That should be coming out soon.
Got my copy.
Thank you.
And Yuarni is plug your book, man.
Oh, okay, we're doing this now.
Why not?
Bold Saga, right there.
Oh, dope.
Nice. Afrofuturism manga for the culture, by the culture. It's actually it's an acronym. Bold is brave. Right there. Bold. Brave onwards, limit destroyer.
There you go.
So that's basically what it's about.
I'm taking notes.
Okay. So they just got purchased, bro. Thank you.
Yep.
Thank you.
And you know, one of the things that.
Go ahead.
Oh no, I just wanted to say, you know, while we're talking about voting with our dollars, another thing that I'd like to say and oftentimes talk about this is the other thing that we cannot do as part of this Afrofuturist movement is we can't be ashamed of it. I think too often we're embarrassed to claim what is ours. We're embarrassed to claim what we come up with, and we're embarrassed to say to other people, like, if you're going to be part of this, you know, this is our house kind of a thing, and we can't be afraid to circle the wagons around it, because, you know, as part of this thing of voting with your dollars, if you don't do that, other interests will come in that don't necessarily have your best interest at heart, and they will take it, reshape it, and sell it back to you, and it's going to look like something different. So when you're seeing all of us and the names that you guys just mentioned putting
Did you
out,
say it's going to look like hip hop at the Olympics?
Exactly. Break dancing for the Queen, you know, for the Queen in England, you know. So that's the other thing that I would say we have to be cognizant of is, you know, it's okay to say this is ours. It's okay to say, you know, it's Afrofuturism and emphasize the Afro. You know, if someone wants to be part of anime culture, there are certain rules they have to follow. They have to recognize certain aesthetics. They have to recognize the rules that come with it. Recognize its Japanese ancestry. Yes, influenced by American aesthetic and American comics, but there's something special and unique about it. And I think that if we're talking Afrofuturism, that's the thing that always concerns me when we come up with something like you mentioned, hip hop, that we created, get embarrassed by it, don't see the viability in it. We're waiting for other people to kind of put their stamp of approval on it. And then by that time, we've lost it and then it becomes something intended to be.
I have to co-sign that definitely, because I was going to say, like, you know, one thing about hip hop culture is that, you know, being in the academy, being a professor, teaching in that particular space, you know, you have people who poo-pooed something like hip hop as, you know, just kind of like a fly-by-night culture, and then we're playing catch up. And now you actually have, you know, an archive at Harvard on hip hop. You have an archive at Cornell that's a hip hop archive, right? Because now you realize it was like this amazing social movement and very powerful creative culture. Now, what's interesting about it is because a lot of us geeks ended up in the academy, the the Academy has been driving a lot of the conversations around Afrofuturism long before, you know, Black Panther or Janelle Monáe and all this stuff jumped off. So I think that's really interesting. And, you know, I've never seen a culture so entrenched in so many different spaces. It's really kind of crazy. We're in a very interesting, like, cultural, historic moment right now, because we're talking comics, film, music, politics, you know, spirituality, it's, that's why I came with this term, the Black speculative arts movement, because to me, it's like the next iteration of, you know, the arts movement that was connected to the Black power struggle. So, yeah, because it's there, you know, you have the same people in the streets, you know, marching for Black Lives Matter who go home and write science fiction stories. You know, that's, yeah, it's amazing to me.
Yeah, I'd also like to add that I think that, and this is something I've been thinking about for a while, is that in this particular moment in time, in history, and you know, we are uniquely situated, right? We're at a time where, for example, there was 30 years ago when I was, you know, with the scholars I was studying, they were actually fighting to defend, writing books about Africa being the foundation of civilization. Right. And people were writing counter narratives at that time. And I was coming up on those scholars, the Chancellor Williams, John Henry Clark, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. Right. Nobody does that right now. Nobody argues that right now. Right. You can find that on PBS. PBS did an entire series on that. Right. So we have, in part, we have our past. We're uniquely situated where we have the technology, almost like everyone has almost the same level of technology, right? So we have, and then, but while we have this technology with this knowledge of our past, we also have uniquely in this time a vision of what the Afrofuture, what a Black liberated future can look like. Because Afrofuturism is actually now popular culture. Right?
Yes.
So literally, it's like we are existing in 3 points in time right now, which is the first time that really in my studying of American history, that I actually see that we're situated so uniquely and so perfectly to actualize our Black liberated futures, right? Not to say that it's perfect, but I think that we're, like I said, we're uniquely situated, and this is a beautiful moment in some very particular ways. And I think, if we don't think so, guess what? Those who stormed the Capitol definitely believe in this.
Right. Which to Stacey's point is important that we ensure that this movement and what we're doing doesn't get co-opted. If you, with like you said, with technology, with TikTok, with all the things that we have at our fingertips now, and going back to hip hop, you have people talking about, oh yeah, this new thing that they do, DJs do with called slow and reverb, and we've been doing chopped and screwed for 25 years. You know, but the reinvention of an idea because they've heard it now, and then co-opted it and said, oh hey, yeah, DJ whoever invented it 5 years ago, and like I said, we've been doing it for 20 years. It's so important that obviously they can't take the cultural aspect of Afrofuturism, of Black speculative fiction, but they can take what they've tried to do so many times in taking the heart of an idea that we have. They try to take the heart of the idea of hip hop and like, oh, anybody can do it without the struggle of what I call like the Jurassic Park theory. Like Jurassic Park, they talk about, oh yeah, like our scientists, you know, did this, and they said, no, your scientists didn't study anything. They just took the next natural step, and they never had to do the steps before it so that they understand the gravity of what they're doing. And that's what these co-opted movements, like being a kid from the 90s and seeing that Black Power age of hip hop and seeing what it is now and seeing how that got co-opted, it's so important that we keep our strength and like Stacey said, you know, circle the wagons when we need to and oust those that aren't doing what's right for the movement itself and trying to let it be co-opted and become something that it's not.
I want to pop up this real quick. JR Poole again says he has about 13 links to cons on his website. JR, pop your website in the comments and we will pop it up there. And then Dan Schmidt, author of Worms Crawl In, who I just wrote a review about on IndieComicsDispatch.com, and it's a fantastic book. Said, this is being recorded, right? Of course, Dan. Of course.
It's always recorded, Dan.
What is it?
Always. And then Black on Both Sides NYC on Instagram says Williams' book, The Ex-Con Voodoo Priest, Googled, and the African King, I think something, is an amazing read. So a little shout out for you there, William.
Thank you. Thank you.
We've talked a lot about writing and comic books in particular. This is the Indie Comics Dispatch, so people probably just assume we're talking only about comic books. But Afrofuturism is not just about comics. It's about so much more than that. So what are some other genres that people might not expect Afrofuturism to pop up in?
Wow. You name it.
Well, that's why I think it qualifies as a different type as an artistic movement, because just to be clear about it, I mean, when Afrofuturism gets coined, it's primarily thinking about literature, right? Because Derry interviews Sam Delaney, Trisha Rose, and Greg Tate in Black to the Future, which is where the term is coined, right? And so music, of course, is another aspect where Afrofuturism is pretty prevalent in film. So honestly, all the media, I mean, it's a transmedia cultural expression. And actually, if you look at like the original Derry article, comics are juxtaposed with the definition, because he's talking about milestone media. If you look at that original article that the term appears in, the only image that isn't a comic is actually Remo Z. It's a Remo Z image. Other than that, everything else is comics. So, so we've been trying to like reconnect Afrofuturism to comics. That's why it seems like it's prevalent, but it's in every type of culture, even like dance. I mean,
house music, jazz,
fashion. Fashion. I mean, it's become mainstream. That's the thing, which is a good thing, I think, in some ways. You have to, like Brian said, you have to, control that particular space. But when it becomes something that's on people's minds, that creates a market space for you too, because you can utilize the market to, empower yourself economically too. Because we still are in a capitalist space. Let's be clear about that. But controlling the narrative is actually very important. One of the things.
So I thought you were done. Go ahead, John. Mm-hmm.
No, last thing I was going to say is one of the things I think that helped proliferate this latest version of Afrofuturism was what Stacey was talking about earlier, was the ubiquitous nature of the democratization of tools, right? Mm-hmm. So everybody can actually get Adobe, Creative Suite, and we can do things like this. You don't necessarily need a large company to put out your work anymore, and it's kind of level the playing field. So if you think about the advent of, say, like the powerful way that smartphones do with internet access and also printing on demand technology, I think is a turning point too, as far as like how we get our ideas out. Anyway, go ahead, Stacey. I'm sorry.
I was also thinking about mental health, right? So imagine like when the pandemic first jumped off and we were in quarantine, DJs like, for example, D Nice blew it wide open and kept us sane. Right, like that first weekend, like where I think it was like 20,000 people came through. Then the next night, like maybe 50. Right. Third night, like over 100,000 people came through. Right, and we were all listening. We were all following. Like for that moment of time, and it wasn't just him, but other DJs, right, were coming on and going live, and it was crazy. I remember when I got back here, like on June 1st, I tried to order DJ equipment, and it took like 2 months to get here, just to get like a pair of turntables. They were like, Technics is out of turntables. They got to make them. I'm like, why? Because everybody and their mother was becoming a DJ, right? Yeah. So when you look at what was, and I'm not saying it's solely because of D Nice, but I mean, seriously, like what he did to keep us sane and healthy as we were in the house, right? Couldn't go anywhere and didn't understand what was going on. Mm-hmm. That was just as much Afrofuturism as an Octavia Butler, prophetic book written in the 90s, right? The mid 90s, or anything that's coming out, just as powerful as Black Panther. right? Like we don't have a Black Panther type of Wakanda future that we want to imagine and activate if we don't have mental health right now.
That's right.
You know, so we got to think about that also, in my opinion, as Afrofuturism, if we want to really start looking at what Afrofuturism is.
You know, and to that point.
Oh, sorry.
Go ahead.
No, go ahead. On you, brother.
Oh, I just wanted to say to that point, you know, I think mythology is a big part of mental health. You know, I think the storytelling, seeing yourself in these positive lights, seeing yourself as creators in these stories and so forth. And I think that that is something we cannot underestimate, the power of myth and how that can build up a people or tear them down. So that's another reason why, for me, it is so important that, you know, all these folks that are out here documenting this movement, the folks that are contributing to it, you know, that's why it's important, once again, that we circle the wagons around it, because that myth building is a big part of mental health. Because, you know, as we've proven time and time again, you know, when you see yourself in that negative light, you start to carry yourself, you know, thusly, you know, so to see yourself in that positive light, to see yourself as the hero, as the heroine, you know, heck, even as the villain, you know, to see yourself in all these different spaces, you know, I think that that goes a long way in terms of mental health.
Yes, and to even continue off what you're saying, William, there was a quote that was said, basically, story is the greatest catalyst for change, and that was Jordan Peele, and that just adds to it. The myth, the story, it's so essential. It's so important.
Well, this is a good transition because... Go ahead, Brian.
I was going to say there's also the fact that there are some of us that didn't realize how entrenched in Afrofuturism and Black speculative fiction we've been our entire lives. I mean, we've been doing Afrofuturism since, you know, Missy did the I Can't Stand the Rain video, you know what I mean, and the Mega Man video, and Buster, and you know what I mean, and so getting it, like you said, like John said, of like this mixed media and this transmedia movement of who and what our culture is, was, and could be, is such an important part, again, of the mental health and of having a picture of what we are. Because, I mean, if you look at, again, if we talk about the last week, people try to act like we didn't exist before they brought us on ships, and then after they reluctantly had to free us, that we weren't anything, which is the farthest from the truth in terms of our culture, the depth of character, the depth of history, and everything that we are, that pushes our entire culture forward, and then in turn pushes their culture forward. Like we all said, that, you know, we're the battery. Where does that battery come from? Where does that energize? It comes from all the things that we are and all the things that this culture is.
So two things. A comment from the Books of Ty on Instagram. Indie comic creator, upcoming indie comic creator, posts his books on Instagram. It's a chance. He says it's a chance for us to discuss our ideas. Talking about Afrofuturism, it's a chance for us to discuss our ideas, our experiences, our voices. A chance for what we didn't have back in the day. And then Black on Both Sides NYC wants to know, how does the panel feel about Marvel's decision not to recast T'Challa in Black Panther?
See what?
We tried to have a good conversation. Now we gotta fight.
I mean, I'll start it. This is how I feel about it. I feel it's Marvel's way of not having to do another Black-led movie. That's what I personally think.
Yeah.
Because I mean, why not? I mean, you've recast other characters. We got like 5, no, if you count the TV shows, 7 Supermen, if you go all the way back, you know. And then if you look at Marvel movies, there's been 2 or 3 Captain Americas if you count the TV shows, and then the old movie they did in the 90s, and then the new movie now.
Was recast.
2 roadies.
Yeah, 2 roadies. I mean,
so this is what I would say real quick is that I think this discussion, well, not in general, right, but I think this the question kind of has to wait for number 3 to come out, right? Because if they just pause for number 2 to give him the respect because he died, and they're like, okay, we're gonna hold off one movie. And if they do the right thing in number 3 and they recast, even if they don't recast T'Challa himself, right? If they recast the lead as a Black actor, then they've done right by whomever. And so far, they've said they're just not going to do it for number 2. Now, if they do it for number 3, then hey, pitchforks, fire. Let's do what we got to do. But
So I mean,
if they honor him for number 2, because of how he died, because look, they didn't recast. Heath Ledger died after Dark Knight. He was supposed to be in Rises. They didn't recast him. They waited, and it went 5 years, and then they did it again. They did Joker again, the character again. So if they're just honoring the death, and then the next iteration they do the right thing, then I think it should wash together.
So how are they planning to do part 2? Because I heard from people I know that they're not even planning to do part 2, which is the reason why I said what I said.
Something brewing. Stacey has something brewing.
Okay, yeah,
I do. So here's the thing. This is what I want to see. This is what Stacey wants to see. I want to see T'Challa in the ancestral realm. I want to see him there with Eric Killmonger. He's the Black Panther too, right?
Nope.
So he would be in the ancestral world. I want to see that cipher, and I want to see Shuri access that.
Yep.
Yeah.
She did it in the comics.
That's right.
She did it in the comics. That's how I look at it. Like, a lot of people are against her taking it, but I mean, why not? She became Black Panther in the comics, and then if you do exactly that and have her brother, to me that's homage. Have her brother saying you have the mantle now, and she goes to the ancestor range. That can be homage for his death. That could be paying respects to his death also.
Yeah,
they got all this. They just brought Luke Skywalker back in the Mandalorian. They can put him in there.
Come on, right there. You took it out of my mouth.
Yep.
There's no way they're not going to make another one. Though. It's just too. At the end of the day, Marvel is they want to make money.
Corporation, right?
Corporation. Successful, films have ever made. So that's going to happen. I mean, one of the things I was thinking about is what about doing a story about Shuri having to access an adventure of their father, T'Chaka, and actually, because the Black Panther is a mantle that's passed down from generation. So anyway, I was going to say, you know what I was thinking about is, can I ask a question right quick? So talking about Marvel and stuff, how do you feel about characters that were created in the blaxploitation era, like Luke Cage and the Falcon, and characters like that we've actually kind of like come to know and kind of love? But a character like Brother Voodoo, like, what are your thoughts about a character like Brother Voodoo, for instance? What do you think? Dr. Voodoo, your version. How do you feel about this character?
I like Dr. Voodoo, but I think he needs to probably be revamped a little bit. But I do like him. I do like the character. I just think that they probably should reach out to people who are actually in that culture to understand more, so that they can do right by him.
Yeah.
William had a smile. I want to hear William's opinion on this.
I think what happens is a lot of times when we see, especially talking about that era, when we see Black characters, what we're really seeing is someone else's idea of what a Black person is. And I think that when you have that Black creativity behind the scenes, if they are knowledgeable, that's the other thing we got to get away from. Just because it's a Black creator, that doesn't guarantee a certain outcome. If they're knowledgeable of the topic and they're respectful of it, you get a more honest representation. I remember looking at Luke Cage on Netflix, and I was like, there's no way they can retell this the way it was told when it originally came out. And it seemed to me that they recognized some of the mistakes, or whether intentional or not, that the original creator of Luke Cage made, and they corrected it. I remember the great scene when he looked in a mirror and he had the it's like I look like a slave. So I think that when you have that sensitivity behind it, you get a better representation. You talk about Brother Voodoo. I remember watching the Doctor Strange movie, getting so excited in the theater when I saw a drum in the Sanctum. So I'm like, oh man, I don't know who caught that, but I got excited.
I was like, right?
Exactly.
I'm waiting for them to bring him, but I don't.
Exactly.
Who knows what they're going to.
But I remember Papa Midnight, I think is a great example of what happens when you have sensitive representation behind a character. You look at his original incarnation in the Hellblazer series. I mean, he was straight out of some 1940s movie, about voodoo. And then you get Matt Johnson taking over doing the miniseries that puts him in the context of the Conjurer Man, that historic context. So to your point, Professor Jennings, I'm thinking, you got to have that sensitivity and knowledge behind the character, revamp them, bring them back, because I don't know, we're going to get into this, but this idea of just switching races of a character when you have so many black characters that already existed, I'm like, bring those guys up, bring those women up, and tell those stories. You know, so I don't know.
Don't open that can of words, because Britt and I talk about that all the time. Like I personally hate that. Like, and I think it gives me a lot of other black creators hate me because of that, because I hate that. I've been writing black characters ever since I can. All of my main characters have been black ever since I was in the first grade, you know. So to see a white character, like, you know, turn black, to me is kind of a spit in the face, because I'm like, you can get somebody to either bring back the black characters that we have or create a brand new black character. Why do we have to get, you know, the remantling, you know, Black Captain America, Black Wonder Woman, Black Superman? Why do we have to get that? That to me, that's scraps. You know, that's like me sitting at a dog bowl and my parents get finished with their food and they're like, "Oh, here's the bones." Like, that's how I feel every time I see that. I know a lot of people like that, but I don't. Like, I hate it.
I think it's about controlling. I think it's about controlling narratives, though, right? Because some of these older characters, I mean, we brought up like Luke Cage on Netflix, right? So Luke Cage on Netflix, the music and the vibe of that show was right. Do I think Mike Coulter was the correct actor? Not necessarily, but okay, it is what it is. Right. Season 1 was good. I think season 2 wasn't as good.
Really?
In certain ways. The villain, what you call it, was dope on season 2. But
the villain,
but one of the things that we as people should do and can do in terms of when characters are recreated as black characters is controlling that narrative and controlling how we feel about it. A lot of times it's mantles, right? When we talk about a Black Captain America, it's the mantle that is passed off.
There you
right?
go.
And so if we have a Black Superman, that's the mantle that is passed off.
But here's my
Bruce Wayne could be a black dude. Batman could be a black dude, and he actually should be if you go historically, right? If you go, his parents were his dad was a doctor, the time he was created, the city he was in, but the mantle of the Bat could be something different. Again, the mantle of Superman could be something different. The mantle of Kid Flash, you know.
I get that, but what I'm saying is, but this is what I'm saying. Why make Clark Kent black when you have Vazad? He's black Superman from Earth 2. There is a Superman who's actually just called the Superman. Clark Kent fought him and said that he is stronger. He was like, he's stronger than me. Guess what? The Superman is a black man from another Earth. Use those.
I agree with you, right?
Just like Wonder Woman, you have her sister Nubia. Yeah. Just bring Nubia back. Why make Wonder Woman black when you got Nubia? That's what I'm getting at.
But how many of those characters has that happened to? I mean, in actuality, right? So blurb would be, we're turning Wonder Woman black, right? Like, that's the blurb. But when you go into the actuality of it, it is a new character. I'll use no, it wasn't Barry Allen. It is who was the second Flash? Who's Kid Flash?
You're talking about
no, it's Barry Allen. I'm sorry, it's
Wally
Barry
West.
Allen. No, Wally West, right? So Wally West.
Yeah.
They were like, oh, Wally West is now going to be black. But Wally West isn't black. There's still white Wally West. The black Wally West is from another dimension. So they're doing that. But again, it's about mantles and narrative.
Yeah.
When the blurb is only we're gonna turn Spider-Man black. They didn't turn Spider-Man black. They created Miles Morales. So that is more of a tech that we as black creators need to be behind in terms of are they? But not only behind it, but behind it and like William said, with black creators that are sensitive and knowledgeable, right? I want a Miles Morales book with somebody of color writing it and making a great narrative, which they've done. That's a great thing. That's something that we should never be against.
But personally, I think with Miles and Wally, they did those two correctly. Personally, I think because they, in a sense, even though some people think that Miles stepped on the toes of Peter Parker, that was to me more of a true pass on. And even with Wally,
steps on the old generation.
Exactly. You know, even with Wally, when their New 52 merged, you know, the convergence, all that stuff that happened that brought in the New 52, they kind of already let you know that this was going to happen with all of that. So it was done more correctly. What I'm more getting at is just, oh, you want a black character? Here you go. We're going to make them black. And to me, that's like, you know, but realistically, Say what? Say
I think
again.
you have more movies and television.
When does that happen realistically though?
More movies. It's more in movies and television. Probably.
It's more
I
movies
agree
and
with
television
that.
than
television than the actual page.
Stacey's been itching to say something, guys. Let's Stacey jump in.
After Stacey, and we,
I was going to shout out. Sometimes, I was thinking about when people get it right, and sometimes I remember the argument used to be, we don't want nobody white writing about us, right? Because they always getting it wrong. But when they get it right, we got to shout them out, right? And we've shouted out like Brian Michael Bendis, he got it right, with Miles Morales, right? I want to shout out like our colleague Damian Duffy, right? Who a lot of people don't know is white, right? Because he writes some of the dopest Black stories, who adapted Octavia Butler's the graphic novels, right? So and a lot of people, because his name is Damian, a lot of people think when they're surprised when they meet him. But he's another person who gets it right? And John and I have been working with him John's been working with him longer, but we have projects coming up and we've worked on things together. And he's a white cat who gets it right. He understands the culture, right? So I wanted to add that because I think it's important. I think it's important that as creators, we have the ability to write any type of story, create any type of story about anybody that we want to write about, create about. But it's important to do the research and it's important to get it right. And when people get it right, we got to acknowledge that they got it right.
Yes. Agreed. Because I know, like, even for my characters, even like just because I'm Black, I don't know every Black culture. Like I grew up in North Carolina. I grew up in North Carolina. I grew up in the boonies, the sticks. What part? What part of North Carolina? Trenton. Like a lot of people, like
I was in
Fayetteville. Okay, so we were about 75 miles northeast of you. So in Jones County, my parents live in Onslow County, Jacksonville now. But that's where I grew up at. And there's Black people who grew up in New York, Black people who grew up in Chicago, Black people who grew up in Miami. All these different places. Like if I'm writing a character from New York, I have friends from New York, and I ask them, hey, what's the slang? What's the terminology? How would they react to this to make it more authentic? Even for my white characters, I'll ask a white friend, hey, how would I do this? How would I make it more authentic? Like I have a character who's from France. She's Black. I don't know what Black people have had to go through in France.
Right.
I know what we had to go through in America. So I asked the question, like, if I ever meet a Black person or a French Black person, like, does this sound right? Is this going right? Or did I do that wrong? And to me, I think that helps if anyone does it. The thing is, unfortunately, some people don't. They're just like, they watch a movie and they're like, hey,
exactly.
I'm just gonna write this the way that I saw it in that 1970s movie, and it's like but that's not us. That's not everybody. Like all of us probably come from different walks of life, because I can tell you right now, Fayetteville, even though it's in North Carolina, Fayetteville is totally different from Trenton, totally different from Greensboro, totally different from Raleigh, and that's all in the same state. But
so John had a comment, and we're going to go to John, and then we'll go to William and Uwarni. Sorry, my mouth. And then we want to get out of here because we don't want people's spouses mad at Uwarni for calling this meeting this evening. John, you have something to say?
I want because it was to kind of piggyback a little bit off of some things that Tia and Stacey were saying, and also Brian about legacy, about what I used to call hand-me-down heroes is what I used to call them. Particularly a character like Steel, which I have some umbrage with because it's just different ideas kind of prestiged into a character. And I think what made me change how I thought about these characters was a character like Mr. Terrific, for instance. Mr. Terrific, I think, is a really great, update of a character. The Crimson Avenger as well, from DC, I think is a really great update of that character. And that's what made me start to think like, oh, wait a minute. These characters are just legacy characters, who happen to be Black. Because if you think about it, like Barry Allen, is the first legacy character. He's the Silver Age Flash, right? He shifts over from what's his face, Jay Garrick.
Garrick, yep. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, differently from Jay Garrick, of course, you have Alan Scott, who becomes Green Lantern.
He's the Green Lantern, the first Green Lantern.
You have these legacy characters, but up until this point, they've just all been white men, you know. And so what happens is, you know, we start to get legacy characters who just happen to be other people, you know, who happen to represent more of what the world looks like. And that's the way I look at it. So, oh, wait a minute, you know, the Crimson Avenger is a legacy, like she's literally a legacy character because she's carrying the guns of the original Crimson Avenger. They're haunted. And I thought that was a very clever way to pass, as you say, to pass on the mantle, you know. And so that's what made me start to rethink, okay, these are legacy characters, which is part of the superhero lore. You know, the legacy character is part of how superheroes function, right? All the way back to like proto superheroes like the Phantom, for instance, right? Literally like based off the idea of passing down a mantle. And then and so yeah, so that's the way I think about it now. But I was on the same point. I was like, I don't need to, you know, I don't need these, as you say, scraps. You know, I call them hand-me-down heroes, right? And but since then I've actually changed my tune and realized that if you, what you're doing is like we're calling we're not normalizing the passing to a certain degree. We actually like are focusing on the fact that they are quote unquote different, right? But they're not. They're just people who happen to have more melanin in their skin, you know, and you know, come from a different, you know, background. But as you say too, you can do it wrong and you can do it right. And you know, anyway, so that's
because in my eyes, as long as they do it right, I'm okay with it. And I agree with both, like what Brian was saying. I agree with what Brian was saying. I agree with what all of you were saying about it. It's just I think I've seen some where they were just done wrong. Yeah. Then I've seen some where they were done amazingly. You know, like for instance, Miles Morales, he was done amazingly. Wally West, he was done amazingly.
I think what's the name? Montoya? Is it Montoya?
Yeah. The Question, like her past one was done amazingly whenever she became the Question. Detective Montoya when she became the Question. You know, some characters is done right. You could tell someone actually thought about it. And I think that's more of what I'm getting at. They thought about, okay, we want to bring more Black characters in.
Right.
Let's do this. And they actually thought about the process rather than just
slapping it on there.
Doing it. Yeah. You know, and to me, it's two noticeable things, especially for me being a writer for as long as I have. I see it and I'm just like, did you even think about this? Like somebody could have sat down and thought about this, you know? So,
like when Captain America had a Black Bucky. Like
yeah, exactly.
No one said, "Wait a minute, I don't know. We want to do that." I think you're more likely to see the switching and not the legacy in film and television.
Yeah,
I think that's where more likely you're going to see them
Agreed.
taking the character out and putting a Black guy in. And you're like, "What? Black Human Torch? What happened?" That's where you're more likely to see it. And I think because that's just this quick fix that a lot of time Hollywood hopes to have.
Yeah.
Hollywood trying to cash in on trends. Whereas at least in the comic medium, you got folks that are taking the time, giving it some thought. And like you said, many times they will get it right, or at least it's the idea of they're simply passing it down. You don't have a Black Bruce Wayne, you know.
Right.
But I also think that we also have to recognize when you talk about folks that got it right, we got to recognize these Black comic book creators that were doing it right from the beginning. You know, so often when we talk about Black comic book characters, there's this long history where we see like in the beginning, they were these horrible stereotypes. And over time, folks had to be convinced to update their stories. But, you know, you look at something like, you know, like Brother Man comic, you know, New Force. I mean, these guys were doing it right from the beginning. And for me, I love to shout those men and women out because they didn't have to be convinced. They didn't have to be told. They did it right from the start, and there's nothing they had to go back and clean up.
Yep. Well said.
Varney.
All right. I think that's so true, and you're so right. It does take a thought process to create an actual character properly. I think the essence is that people want to make something cool, but they don't really focus on the something. That's really where the research comes in. That's where the actual thought comes in. And in the aspects of legacy, and even thinking about something cool in my story, I know that Akon said it best. You know, Shaka Zulu should be a superhero. I'm like, So as the story begins on page 2, you see Shaka Zulu running right through the story. You know, not even trying to sugarcoat it. So it literally takes the research, because I'm really an artist by trade, but I actually did to do the research for 2 years. And in the story, they even speak Xhosa as well as Khoi. Those are African languages. I'm from the Caribbean. I live in New York. I don't speak these naturally, but I had to do time to research it so it's authentic, because people buy into authenticity, because authenticity connects emotionally. It doesn't just look cool, it feels cool because it is cool, because it's real.
Makes sense. Makes sense.
I do want to pop this up. JR Poole posted, I popped it up earlier, but just to circle back, JR Poole posted his URL, theblackheroesmovement.world. Check that out if you're looking for black cons. He's got some on his website, and I'm sure a whole world of black heroes, according to the URL. So check that out for sure. Gentlemen, as we wrap up here, I just want to say thank you again for this wonderful conversation this evening. Guys, if you are out there listening to this conversation, if you missed parts, want to go back and listen to it, it's going to be available as a podcast very soon on all your major podcasting services. So search for us Thursday, Friday, and we should come up with episode 11 here. John, Stacey, William, Uarni, Brian, thank you guys for being here tonight.
This was enlightening. I usually talk more. But I was just listening, man. I was just listening to all of you. Like this was enlightening, like for real. Thank you for coming on.
Thank you. This was great.
Thank you.
Yeah, I want to shout out my homeboy Gerald Boney. What's up, Gerald? Been a minute.
He wants us to know. They've said they were not going to use CGI on Chadwick Boseman. Gerald Boney, if you don't know Gerald's comics, get them. They are fantastic. I love his comics. Look them up if you don't know about Gerald. So, gentlemen, thank you again for being here. And guys, we'll be here. I do my creator interview series on Sunday. Tune in Sunday at 3 p.m. and we will be interviewing another creator. We'll be back here again next Wednesday night with Plot Night, how to plot a good comic book. Here we're leading that charge. So tune in next week if you're new to the show this week, and leave here some comments next week.
That's gonna be a fun one.
Interesting. Okay.
Hope you all drop in.
Yeah.
Gentlemen, thank you again. The Indie Comics Dispatch has a Patreon, patreon.com/Indie Comics Dispatch. If we get to 10 patrons, we're going to make Scorpio Chronicles play D&D with us live on air. If you haven't watched last week's episode, we talked for 20 minutes, and then he came in with what's D&D? So they can play his first game of D&D.
That's great.
So we're gonna introduce him.
Gentlemen, thank you again. Everybody out there watching, thank you. We will see you next time.
Thank you.
Take it easy.
Thank you,
Take care.
Have a good one.